It is the most difficult thing to overcome when someone is virtually certain that they are right about something, and in reality, they are actually not right. They are incorrect about something. So the simple thing here is that when you are absolutely certain that you are correct, you are wrong 20% of the time. Out of every 5 times that happens, 1 time you are dead wrong. So if you're thinking about like how to make yourself more effective, one of the things you can do is learn new skills. You can go out and you add things that you didn't know before, learn new behavior. But once you get to a certain point in your life where you've been adding new skills for years or decades, actually the real benefit, the real opportunity for kind of a radical growth is probably in unlearning poor habits as opposed to learning new things. Time is the most valuable resource on this planet, right? There's nothing more valuable than time because time cannot be replenished. There's nothing you can do to get more time. And so by seeing how someone spends their time, you can actually see what is actually important to them.
Hello, and welcome to the 10X Brand Podcast. My name is Simone Knight, and I am your host, bringing you a podcast that is dedicated to helping brands, both large and small, maximize their reach and revenue through marketing with AI. Now, I want to introduce you to my special guest today, Mr. Orlando Hampton. He is the Chief Customer Officer at Affiniti, a $2 billion unicorn with 2,000 plus employees. Affiniti provides award-winning contact center solutions. They provide software that uses AI to make optimal pairings between customers and customer service agents. In addition, Orlando is an accomplished public speaker, dedicated champion of diversity in the workplace. He serves on several nonprofit boards focused on providing opportunities to the underserved communities, including Ignite Worldwide. And just recently, he has been named to the boards for the Usher's New Look organization. Welcome, Orlando. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
I am doing fantastic, Simone. It is great to be here. I am just a big fan of you, and I'm just glad to be on the podcast and hope that I can hold the standard that you've already set for the podcast.
Oh my God, what are you talking about? I am so thrilled to have you here. I mean, every conversation with you is always easy. It's entertaining, it's educational, it's inspiring, and this one will be no different. So the 10X Brand Podcast is really about helping brands to elevate, right? It's about growing and maximizing your reach and engagement through AI. And Affiniti obviously does that very, very well. And so I thought, who better to have on this conversation about how we can do this more and more, right? So today we're talking about how people can elevate themselves, elevate their business, elevate their personal brand, and even elevate their community. And before we get into that conversation, I just wanted to sort of get a chance to know you a little more and give the audience an opportunity to talk a little bit more and find out more about who Orlando is. So I want to play a little game with you. Rapid fire.
Ready.
Okay. All right. I don't want you to think. I just want you to react. Okay. So first question, martini or beer?
I don't drink, but martini.
That's what you should say that. Okay. All right. So James Bond, right? We have Pierce Brosnan or we have Sean Connery.
Sean Connery.
Okay. Beach or city?
City.
Miami Beach, city, or Las Vegas?
Las Vegas.
Mm-hmm. Steak or lobster?
Steak.
Okay. And the last question. Men's basketball or women's basketball?
Where is basketball in a runaway?
First answer, because the women just told it, right? So we know that they just had the biggest audience in basketball history, and we are so proud of the women's teams. Thank you, Caitlin. Thank you all for all the great players that really helped to make this happen, make this a moment for us, right? And talk about elevating. Talk about bringing your A game. Talk about bringing people together. I mean, what do you think about all of that just happened with women's basketball?
I find the whole thing incredibly fascinating on a number of fronts. So one of the things, and this is close to your heart, is from a kind of marketing branding perspective, right? So One of the challenges that men's basketball is going through is that they can't keep stars at the schools for long enough to actually turn them into like marketable commodities. And so there used to be a time where stars would play 3 or 4 years of college basketball. And this was great marketing for college basketball because people knew the players on the team, could be excited about next year and seeing those players. It also was great marketing for professional basketball because these players would come in kind of with an already built up brand. People would know them and there was already excitement around this. That has escaped the men's game because there's so many people who are just doing a single year in college. There's a whole group of people who are not even attending college and just going directly into the pros, maybe international players. And so when you watch the NBA draft, even like hardcore basketball fans sometimes don't recognize half the names that are being called. And so you're actually seeing that play out in the women's game, where suddenly there are so many players, whether it's Juju out in Southern California or Angel Reese for LSU or Caitlin Clark at Iowa, but these are known entities. People who have built up names and brands over a period of time. So like Juju is a freshman, the all-time leading freshman scorer in the history of NCAA basketball, but she's coming back to USC next year. And so there'll be excitement around that and people will be interested and those games will be interesting. And so there is really a compelling kind of marketing branding case of what has happened, right? So it's, of course, the quality of play in basketball, but also a big part of it is branding and us recognizing what those brands and catching all of those players. As I'm a dedicated sports fan myself, and, you know, I find that sometimes as sports fans, you're just rooting for laundry. You don't know the players. All right, you're just saying, hey,
that color, I'm there, right?
This is my team, and I'm supporting this team against this other team, and the players become kind of these like faceless, like gray faces. And it's only when you connect with the players where things take off. The NBA itself has the story. The NBA was struggling mightily until Magic and Larry Bird, hit the NBA. And what happened was people got attracted to the players. And so if you look at
storytelling, the branding, yep, absolutely.
It's totally the case. Modern basketball is much more about the players than teams. When, I ask people what team they like, they are just as likely to say they like LeBron James or they like Steph Curry, as opposed to saying that they like the Warriors or they like the Lakers. And so there's a key there from a branding standpoint.
Now, this is pretty interesting because you being the chief customer officer at Affiniti. So what part of what you do is you have conversations with people and you bring people together, right? You bring people to the table. Can you talk a little bit more about, like, briefly, what does the chief customer officer do? And then I want to get into sort of that secret sauce in terms of how you bring people together from a consumer perspective and how we can do more of that in our lives as business owners, as business leaders, and even just people in our community. So talk a little bit more about what a chief customer officer actually does.
So it's awesome. So it's a great question. I consider myself to be a tremendous advocate for our customers within the walls of Affiniti. And at the same time, I'm an advocate for Affiniti in the walls of our customers. So if I'm doing my job correctly, if you ask the customer where my loyalties lie, they would say his loyalties lie with Affiniti. He is always in here trying to expand the reach of Affiniti, get more data for Affiniti, make Affiniti a stickier solution. If you ask my colleagues at Affiniti where my loyalties lie, they would say, I'm not so sure he's not too loyal to the customer. He's always here advocating for the customer, pushing for more things for the customer, wanting us to give more value to the customer, being aggressive about the customer's needs, even if the customer isn't aggressively pushing up on it, he is aggressively following up with us internally. So my job is primarily to be an advocate on both sides of the fence. And you're doing well at this job. Both sides think you're a little too, your advocacy is a little too strong for the other side. The other thing I was going to say about this is, like, there's a real dividing line between chief customer officer and the business development functions in the company, right? So just sales. So although I'm involved in sales, it's in the Affiniti world at our biggest customers. There are probably very few people at a customer who can actually sign off on a product like Affiniti just because of the sticker price. So there's maybe call it 5 people in an organization who can actually sign a contract like that. At the same time, there are probably 20 times as many people, 100 people who could actually say no. They can't actually agree to sign a contract, but they could say no. They could come up with a series of objections, right? Our technology stack is too high, or there's a compliance or labor reason or legal or finance. And so as chief customer officer, I spend most of my time with 100, right? So it's not, it's not that I don't get involved with the decision makers or helping people to say yes to purchase products, because I do, but most of my time is spent managing all of the stakeholders who could potentially say no, and you need them on board. And so myself and my team, we focus most of our time with those.
Well, okay, so you're dealing with the customer a lot, and I'm sure that you've come across some times when the customer thought that they knew what they wanted, right? And then thought that their solution was the best possible solution. I mean, one of the things that I've heard you say in a previous conversation, and I want to sort of bring that to the forefront now, is that when it comes to some opportunities or some problems, it's not the things that you don't know that causes the problem. It's the things that you think you know, but are wrong about, that actually create an issue. Now, there's a funny thing that, we say in my family, it's like, you're wrong and loud. You're wrong and loud, and you just need to go sit down. So how do you handle that conversation in terms of those scenarios in these meetings with customers, in just general life, when people are just wrong and loud, and you need to be able to sort of maneuver that to get to what is right for the customer? How does this sort of come right to the customer journey in a way that actually is going to bring value to the business or to the endeavor that you're working on? Because this literally is your everyday. So what would you say about that?
I love the family creed about being loud and wrong. It is the most difficult thing to overcome when someone is virtually certain that they are right about something, and in reality, they are actually not right. They are incorrect about this thing. And that actually happens much more than we get credit for. There's a famous study out there where they go to people and they give you 100 questions to answer. And then of those 100 questions, once you've answered all the questions, they say, great, look at these 100 questions and now pick the 10 questions that you are certain about, that you absolutely know that you have these answers correct. And what happens is, even when you yourself get to selectively pick the 10 questions you are certain about, on average, people are right about 8 of them. So the simple thing here is that when you are absolutely certain that you are correct, you are wrong 20% of the time, right? So if you really think about that, then you can imagine how often you're wrong when you're not certain. But this is when you are certain you are correct. Out of every 5 times that happens, 1 time you are dead wrong. And
wow,
so I think it's the first thing is understanding that about yourself. So that's just incredible knowledge to have about yourself, that although you are passionate and you are certain that you are correct, knowing that 20% of the time you are incorrect is a good thing to know, because you don't want to get so committed to any position that it's impossible for you to backtrack from that position, because 20% of the time you're going to have to. You're going to have to backtrack because you're actually incorrect about it. So that's the first thing, is like, I have to know that about myself, that when I go in and present something, I could be wrong.
Now, here's my question. Do you find that sometimes people are less likely to think about that 20% the higher up they may go in an organization? Can that be a trend? Because I know I've seen some of that. Go back to that loud and wrong.
Yeah, it's totally the case that people will draw down on this. Now, the funny thing about that is that it's not intuitive, but it is true. The higher you go in an organization, the less close you are to actually what is really going on. So in a weird way, the greater your number of promotions, the higher you go, that's the further away you are from the actual reality, the actual truth of what is going on. So to your point, it is possible that as you get really high in these organizations, you are adamant that you are correct about something, but in that case, it's probably more likely that you're wrong about it. It's probably greater than 20%. because you're not actually doing the work. I'll give you a real life example that happened like in my business. I obviously talk to a lot of executives about their contact centers and how customers are engaging them. So whether that is through chat or through voice or mail or any other kind of retail setup, but however their customers are interacting with them. And what I find is at the top of the house, people have a general idea of their customer service approach. So when you sit down with a CEO, the CEO may say something like, our customers are really important to us, so we never, ever have them wait on the phone. When they call us, we always have an agent available to take their call immediately. And you say, okay, I get it. No customer wait time. There's always a surplus of agents available and no customers in queue. And then as I get closer and closer and closer to the operation, you'll end up meeting a center director who says, hey, actually, it's a nightmare for us to have agents who are sitting here and being available. It's wildly inefficient to have all these agents just sitting here and doing nothing. So we like to keep customers in queue so that agents are kind of relatively busy all the time. And keep in mind, both of these people work at the same organization, but the person at the very top just has a belief that their operation is running completely different than the people in the operation. So I have to be aware of that, because if I'm talking to the person at the top, but I'm working with the person in the operation, it's important for me to understand the reality of what's going on and not kind of the aspirational goal of where they like to go. And so I find myself between that a lot. Anytime you have to kind of traverse between the executive world and the frontline world, it's just important to understand that, hey, even though you heard this from the biggest boss, it still could not be true. It's still possible that at the working level, something different has happened.
Now, you bring up an interesting point, right? Because now let's talk about unlearning some of this, right? Because this person at the operational level was absolutely sure about their perspective and their data. And then you have the person at the leadership level was also very, or higher leadership level, I should say, is also very sure about their data and their perspective. But there, again, there's that 20%, right? Some of this is not correct. And so there has to be some unlearning in this behavior and some open-mindedness to sort of having the conversation that's going to allow the organization to be flexible, to grow, and also to create value in that space where you're at the sweet spot, the Goldilocks zone, right?
Yes.
Or efficiency versus customer experience. So what about that unlearning these things that could be detrimental to the business?
This is really so powerful. It's weird because I can actually see in the back, I have a book called Unlearn, which is, it's an entire, it's actually a book about not like taking things that you think are true and unlearning them. And the premise behind this, and it's a good one, is that once you get to a certain point in your life and your career, the ability, the room you have to grow by learning new things is probably smaller than how much you would benefit from unlearning bad things that you already know, right? So,
okay, well, let's say that again. Let me make sure I caught that right. Say that again, please.
So if you're thinking about like how to make yourself more productive, how to make yourself more effective, one of the things you can do is learn new skills. You can go out and you add things that you didn't know before, learn new behaviors. But once you get to a certain point in your life where you've been adding new skills for years or decades, actually the real benefit, the real opportunity for kind of a radical growth is probably in unlearning poor habits as opposed to learning new things, right? So going back,
like diminishing returns.
That's right. It's like, sure, you could learn a whole new thing around the new science of exercise and working with bands and all this stuff. Or maybe you would benefit by just unlearning that eating that dessert every night is appropriate, right? If you just retrain yourself that actually I shouldn't have that big piece of cake, that might actually be more beneficial to you than like the newest innovations in terms of like kinesiology and whatnot. So there is this thing of unlearning. But the thing that, and this kind of goes to your point of like how we apply this in business, is in order to really grow and evolve in business, it's important that you're actually innovating and pushing out new ideas and trying new things. And if you are doing this effectively, some of those ideas are going to fail. It is guaranteed because you're pushing out new ideas and you won't have 100% hit record on ideas. And so you have to leave room for failure. Failure has to be okay. And this isn't just lip service to like, hey, we should be failing sometimes, but it means this whole thing of when something fails, we go on a search to find out who's responsible so we can hold somebody accountable, so we can do something. We have to get that out of organizations. What we need to figure out when things fail is why they failed and what can we do to make it better. Learning who was responsible for the failure is far less important. But it's kind of a thing where intuitively people go to it. And so you have to be willing to fail. And if you're willing to fail, what that means is that you're going to have to be willing to take some chances of things not going your way. And when new information comes, when it's clear to you that this idea has failed, you have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to say, we tried this, it did not work. Now we have new information. We're going to do something different. One of the biggest challenges people have, not only just in business, but in life, is that when people get so committed to an idea, even after the idea fails, people will just double down on it.
Right. Now you've already invested, right? So it's like it's sunk cost, right? You've already invested in that, so now you can't back up. There's a psychology in that, actually.
It's totally the case. We're in a political environment, for instance, where changing your opinion on anything is called flip-flopping, right? It doesn't matter what side of the aisle you are. If you used to have one opinion and now your opinion has changed to something else, then we call you a flip-flopper. We claim that whatever position you have is not legitimate because you used to have another position. But in reality, in our normal lives, we actually encourage people to get new information and change their position, right? If somebody said, I used to think this, but then I got this information and now I've changed for this, we consider that to be like maturity and growth. And so we have to allow ourselves room to make mistakes, and that has to be okay. I saw something like in Japan where they don't have grades for children up until around 4th grade. So up until then, there's no scoring. There's nothing to say that this child's exceeding.
Well, they're just encouraging exploration, right? Instead of perfection, they're encouraging exploration. Right. And I think that that's the path to innovation.
That's totally it. And there's no embarrassing for failing or for not knowing things. When you go up to the whiteboard and you don't know the answer, it's not actually considered to be humiliating. In fact, the best lessons are learned through failure. When you don't know something, if you're looking at this the correct way mentally, I actually enjoy being in environments where I don't know, where I feel that uncomfort that, I don't know the answer to this. I don't know it because I realize I'm going to learn. Like, this is a learning environment.
It's funny. I want to double back down on that, what you said about failure, because there are a lot of lessons from failure. And I remember that there was at one point in my organization where I wanted to create an award for failure. But the award was the best failure. Okay. So the idea was that the project that did not necessarily get to the end desired result, but we learned the most from, that was the award. That was the project that would get the award for the best failure. Because in that case, it's what you just said, Orlando. You learn the most from failure, right? There's a lot of inventors that we hear of. Ben Franklin, right? So these are guys who are very famous inventors, right? And you don't hear about the 10,000 times that they failed at something. You hear about the times that they succeeded. And but that each failure taught them something else to finally get to the point where they learned. So that iterative process is what we have today in business. And the smartest and the most mature companies understand that there is an iterative process for your long-term R&D projects that are going to take 5 years, may even take 10 years. But once you get there, you've gotten there, right? Right now, we have a lot of AI tech. We are going through the fastest growth in technology in human history. I read that Generation Alpha, which is now about 12 years old and younger, that they are experiencing the fastest growth in technology in human history. Think about it. Of all the things that has happened, that have changed, that have been invented in the past 12 years, right? Yeah. And augmented reality, artificial intelligence is obviously at the forefront of that, and businesses are using that every day. Everyday people are using these tools. I was having a conversation with an educator about how school and education is changing, because there's a question as to what about AI when kids have to write a paper or solve some sort of problem? And the conversation turned to this. We are now expected to use a calculator in college, in high school, in middle school, because a calculator is a tool, just like the hammer is a tool, just like a drill is a tool. You don't test a carpenter based on how well he or she is able to build without a hammer or a nail or something like that. You test them on how well they're able to use the tool that they have to create the outcome. So I see AI as the same thing, right? You're testing to see how well you can use this amazing tool to get an even better outcome than you would have gotten without it. And if you think about artificial intelligence kind of like that, then I think that people will be a lot less threatened about it. And people would instead focus on how do I get the knowledge to use the tool rather than a lot of sky is falling, which is, oh my God, I don't know, I'm going to be replaced. We still have a lot of opportunity to learn and to grow with the tool and use it. So I know that that's a big part of what your team is doing, your organization is doing in terms of bridging the tool with humans and making the right pairing. And that is the secret sauce, right? It's bringing me as the user, as the person who's needing support, to the right agent that is going to give me the level of support that I need. And I think that that's revolutionary because you know what? I don't know about you, but I've been on some phone calls where I'm just like, okay, who is this person? I don't want to talk to this person any longer. I need to speak to someone else who actually knows what they're doing. So, I've been on that side of the call center, conversation. So when you come across a situation like that, with clients or potential clients who are maybe part of a company that has not yet modernized the way that they serve their consumer, and there is that apprehension about, oh, do I bring this in? Is it really sealing my own death warrant? Am I actually replacing myself? How do you sort of maneuver through that to help people realize, no, this is something that's going to increase efficiency, elevate your business, expand your capacity to serve more clients, and improve your consumer experience? How do you tell them that without making it seem like I'm just selling you something, right? What is that relationship like?
You say a lot of good stuff there. And this is a big part of this for me is when I'm going in and speaking to customers, I certainly in the early prospect, right? When you're just prospecting and you're selling into these customers, one of the things, and I get my own little cheat code for this, but one, I always try to listen more than I speak, right? So I would try to speak about what capabilities Affiniti has and what Affiniti can do. But my primary goal is to listen for the need that they have. Too often as salespeople, people are trying to solve an issue that no one has ever stated was an issue for them. We're just going in and assuming that they have this need, and I have a perfect thing for this need that you have without really establishing that they have a need, right? So
no validation.
No validation, right? And so
I need you to have this need, so therefore.
Yes. Yeah, I'm sure you have this, therefore you need this. And so here's what I do. I try to here's my little cheat sheet. One is I will ask people, what are the company's goals for them, right? So in the role that they have today, what is their company's goal for them? What does their company see them doing? So let's say they are SVP of call center operations. So what does the company think about you? What do they expect you to do? What do they want you to do? And so people will lay out, here's what the company expects me to do. They expect me to recruit agents and have them available. They expect agents to be knowledgeable and trained and ability to answer the customer's questions. They expect our customers not to wait for an inordinate amount of times, only have to talk to us once and not call back to get issues resolved, right? So there's a series of things the company expects out of them. And then I actually ask them, take me through a day in the life of the work that you do, right? So when you come into work every day, what do you do and how do you go about doing it? And I will go as in depth as they are willing to allow me to go. If they say, hey, come to my office and spend a day with me, I will happily do it. And really what I'm looking for there is time is the most valuable the most valuable resource on this planet. right? There's nothing more valuable than time because time cannot be replenished. There's nothing you can do to get more time. And so by seeing how someone spends their time, you can actually see what is actually important to them, kind of regardless of what the company is asking them to do. Are they spending their time trying to accomplish these things, or are they spending their time on other things? And if they are, that is actually what is probably really important to them, the thing that they're spending their time on. And so it's good to find the difference between what the company's goal is and then what they're actually spending their time. The next question I'll ask them is, what are their personal goals? And keep in mind, this is different than that first question. The first question is, what are the company's goals for you? This question is, what are your personal goals? So your personal goal is perhaps you want to be promoted. Perhaps you want to be, an EVP or the president or the CEO one day. Perhaps you want to be a thought leader in this space and make yourself more viable as a candidate for another job in another area of the business, or maybe even another company. But it's very likely that these goals are not necessarily the same as the company's goal for you. The company's goal for their SVP of contact center operations is not to eventually turn them into the CFO. It's like, that's fine if that happens, but it's not like a stated goal that they plan on turning all of their senior vice presidents into C-level executives at some point. But your goal could in fact be that you want to be a senior level executive. And then my last question is, how can I, or Affiniti in this case, but Orlando personally as well, how can I be of assistance to you? And if you can get people to actually state how you personally can be of assistance to them, then the solution that you are offering, it is custom made, because they're going to tell you, here is how you can be of assistance to me. These are the things that are important to me, right? It's important to me that my agents are having good quality experiences while making sure that our customers have world-class service. And if I understand that that's what's important to you, and then I can figure out, is that something that I can help to offer? Does Affiniti have a product that is going to augment your agents in a way that they feel better about their jobs while they're providing world-class customer service? And if they do, then great. This is like a wonderful marriage. It's possible, though, when you go this route, that there is no need for your services. That actually happens sometimes. You meet people, you talk to them, you figure out what their goals are.
Absolutely.
And what they don't need is your service. They need something else. And I'm open to that as well. I'm open to saying, actually, I don't see a need for our services here. It seems like you need these other things, right? Like maybe your issue is that the agents on your contact center floor, there's 50 agents to every supervisor. And so you actually need more supervisors. Right? You need to cut that ratio down. And that's not something I can offer you. I can offer you advice, but there's no product that I can sell you. And I'm okay not selling you a product that you don't need. And so that's my personal approach to this. And like, it really kind of builds on this, my brand, to the extent that I have a brand in this space. It's around authentic relationships. And so it's important that I'm building relationships and building trust with people. But I personally can only do that if they're authentic. I don't mean that there's like, as praise for myself. I actually mean I'm not good enough at my job to actually connect with people in an inauthentic way. Right? Like it's not my thing.
I don't think I've ever seen anyone not connect with you. Orlando, you are really, you are definitely a genuine person. And the things that you just talked about, you live those ideals to connect and understand people's goals, what they need, and how you can help, right? And I mean, those three simple things go a very, very long way, not only at your job, but also in your community, even in your family, right? What do you need? What are your goals? How can I help? So it sounds so simple. You're like, well, is that really rocket science? It kind of is.
I find it amazing how many people show up with like a complete offer to give you a service without ever asking you if you needed it. They're just full in for this pitch of whatever their service is. And like at the end of the pitch, they then ask you, is that something that you think you would need?
Like, no, like that's a question you should have tested before you even got in this conference room, right?
I just saw a great quote about this. It's so powerful. I wanted to just like print it out. There is nothing more useless than doing efficiently things that shouldn't be done at all.
That's a good one. Oh man, Orlando. I mean, this is really great. I have one last question for you, right? Because at your level in your career, you are working on very big ticket items from a customer and sales generation perspective. And for those people who are in the lead gen business, right? The AEs, maybe mid-career account executives, or maybe someone starting early on. What are the wisdoms that you provided earlier about like figuring out what a person wants, what their goals are and how you can provide it? That's really key. It's so simple that it's brilliant, really, to be honest with you. I don't want to oversimplify it, but I would say like think back to you early in the game, because you've been with Affiniti for like what, 16 years now, right?
Yes.
Think about you early in the game. Think about young Orlando, right? And he's handsome, he's got the nice smile, and he's out there trying to make stuff happen, right? So what advice would you give to young Orlando when it comes to helping companies evolve, helping them leverage the technology and the tools and their people to evolve, to see what's coming and be able to take action at it? What would you say to young Orlando to help other companies, help their clients do something like that?
I really love this. And I have strangely spent lots of time thinking about what I would say to myself, and more importantly, like how I would react. Like if Orlando from the future showed up right now, would I do everything that he said, or would I be like, maybe this guy doesn't know? And so when I think back to myself, so here's what I'll say. 16 years ago, I find that I was incredibly naive around this idea of how startups work and bringing new products into the marketplace. What I truly believed 16 years ago was if you had a great product or service or offering of some kind, that ultimately it would get out there. It would be successful because the product itself was undeniable, just too good of a product not to work. What I realize now is that there is certainly a graveyard of great ideas out there somewhere, right? Some space where incredible ideas have died because people ran out of money, they didn't have the connections, they didn't know how to execute it. And so as it turns out, great ideas are just table stakes. You actually have to have a product or idea that works, but that is just table stakes. Once you have that, you have to figure out how to operationalize it. How do you sell it? How do you get it in the hands of customers? And that in itself is an entirely different skill that you may or may not have as an inventor or an entrepreneur or someone who's come up with a great idea. And I see this so often. I see somebody whose grandmother has an incredible recipe for baking apple pies, and everybody loves grandma's apple pie. And as soon as you taste it, you say, wow, what is this? And they say, that's an old recipe from my grandmother. And before long, if the right person tastes it, they say, hey, you should open a bakery. You should be selling grandma's
so
apple
amazing.
Pie. Right. It's incredible.
Everybody.
It sounds great. It's like, wow, that would make perfect sense. And you know how this story ends. You open this bakery, people taste the pies, they absolutely love the pies. And then one day you come to the bakery to get the pie and they're closed. Because even though you love the pie and you told everyone else about it, they didn't have the operational skills to actually run the business, right? The supply chain management, the personnel, the branding, the marketing, the pricing, the strategy. And so it's not just about your product or service. That would be the one thing I would tell myself. I'd go back and say, hey, look, it's not just about this product. You do have a wonderful idea, but you have to really dive into how you operationalize and how you actually productionalize the ability to get this out to other people. And so that's what I would tell people is that don't undersell the soft skills. Don't say like, hey, I have a great product and I'll figure out the accounting of it later. No, you better figure out the accounting of it now because it doesn't matter how good the product is if your expenses are going to outpace your revenues. You won't last long as an enterprise with that in. So that's probably the main thing I would say. The other thing that I think about a lot is that, and this goes back to my point around time being the most valuable resource. When you have time on your side, you can slow build into a lot of things. So if you just make a commitment that you're going to add one big skill every year, right? You go into this year and you say, you know what, this year, I'm going to learn how to code. I'm going to spend time learning how to code. And next year, I'm going to learn how to ballroom dance. Like I'm going to take classes. I'm going to do ballroom dancing.
Do all the things.
Yeah. And then the following year, I'm going to learn how to drive a motorcycle, right? I'm going to learn how to do it, learn the skills. And then the next year, I'm going to dive on an airplane and figure out what it takes to be a skydiver. Well, each year, that's not that big of a deal, right? Learning how to skydive in a year is not like a huge suck on your time.
That's a no for me, right? I don't care what kind of, I mean, that's not really something I want speedy classes on either, right? That's no, I'm not jumping out of a perfectly good airplane.
Well, I have to admit, I also, if you hear about me jumping out of an airplane, it was because the plane was going down. It is not because I volunteered to do it. But the key is, if you add one of those big skills every year, 5 years from now, just imagine how interesting of a person you will be. Right? It's like, oh, wow, this person is like, they actually spent a year like learning to be a bartender. And he spent another year learning how to cook. And he spent another year.
It's like the Dos Equis commercial, right? It's like the most interesting man in the world, right?
That's right. And so that is like a huge advantage that young people have over the rest of us, is you just have the time. In 10 years, you could put together 10 huge skills that would just make you interesting for the rest of your life. If you're like, oh, wow, this person knows how to cut hair because they spent a year learning how to cut hair.
Now you knew that was your job in college. You knew that you knew that you were out there with your barber skills, earning some extra cash.
I had to do anything. I had to do anything to get my way there. So yeah, so that would be my advice, right? Use time to your advantage and don't undersell the soft skills, because they're important. They're important things. Look, you probably know that better than anybody in branding and marketing. I can only imagine the number of businesses that you come across that are successful in their own way, but they spent literally zero time doing any kind of brand or marketing work. Zero. They've never.
There's some of those in my own family, because I come from a family of serial entrepreneurs, to be quite honest with you, where it's like some word of mouth marketing that was happening. And then there are also some very successful entrepreneurs in my family as well. And their approach to marketing is definitely not as structured and corporate and so forth as mine is, but still effective, right? And what I do is I find myself, Orlando, I don't know about you, I find myself sometimes in these stores or, consumer situations where I am in a huff because I'm waiting too long, or something is not positioned where it should be, from the customer experience, or there's an amazing opportunity for this company or this storefront to do a much better job at something. And I find myself re-engineering the operations in my own, just because I'm like, hey, you know what, you can do this. You can do this a little bit better. And sometimes I actually have told them, of course, they're looking at me like, okay, who are you and why are you telling me this? Right. So I have to explain my background, that I'm an engineer and I'm a marketer. That's why I know how you can improve your business 10x right now.
That's incredible. I can tell you a really quick story. When I was growing up, I went to a barbershop. I'm from Wilkinsburg, from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but a small part of Pittsburgh called Wilkinsburg in the suburbs. And so I went to a barbershop, and every single person in my town went to the same barbershop. And I kid you not, the sign outside the barbershop said barber. That's it. There was no logo, no name, no branding, right? And the person who owned it, they was Charlie, and it became Charlie's Barbershop. That's what everybody called the place, right? I go to Charlie's, and that's where I get my haircut. And you would have to wait 3-4 hours sometimes to get a haircut. And it never even occurred to them that they should add more chairs, add a second location, right? Do something to take advantage of this demand. And it was incredibly profitable. There was lots of people in there spending their money, right? I'm sure Charlie was able to live a good life out of this. But then Charlie died suddenly, and the barbershop just closed, and that was it. And the business just ended. And I look at something like that, and I think that is a clear example of a business that who knows what that business could have turned to. I mean, And I'll give a little hint out there to everybody watching this. I mean, even today, what is the big African-American barber chain? What is it? It doesn't exist.
Crickets.
And there's, so if you're an African-American and you're looking for a barber, what is the chain? Where's the bow rig?
I hear ideas sparking all around the country right now. It's right. Listen to make it for sure.
And it's like, why is that place not called Charlie's? Because Charlie already invented that. Why did Sam Walton turn one store into Walmart, but Charlie turned one barbershop into a great business that closed when he died, right? And those are, honestly, that is the stuff that like makes me jump out of bed. Like, because I'm just like you, and I can't help myself. Like now, I go into these places and like, they're just tired of hearing me talk, right? I'm telling my barber, hey, why don't you at least order supplies with the other barbershops in the neighborhood? At least save money on the supplies.
Right. Economies of scale.
Keep your name. Keep your name up if you want. Fine. Just order all the supplies together. Why don't you just, like, for once, run one promotion? Just back to school haircuts. Right.
It's so funny that you should say this because literally just yesterday, I was having a conversation with a restaurant owner. And they were thinking about how they can multiply their business and add these different services. And so we were talking about, making their place a destination. Why would someone drive 10 minutes, 20 minutes, an hour to get to your place and pass so many other restaurants, right? There's got to be a reason, the food, the environment, the service that makes your place a destination. So they mentioned to me that recently these other restaurants had popped up around them. So I thought, you know what? That's actually great. You know what you guys should do? Let's talk about getting together and doing an event that draws a lot of people to this corridor and do like a bar crawl, a restaurant crawl, something like that. It's one particular day. It's almost like a block party, but you don't necessarily have to shut down the street. And you do a unified marketing message, the unified creative, you send it out from a centralized, each restaurant can send it to their own list. You don't have to share your own list, but everybody does something. Your restaurant does this thing. Let's say when your restaurant is doing the drinks. Let's say these other restaurants is doing the tapas with the hors d'oeuvres, and another one is doing the desserts. So there's a reason for people to go to every single one. There's a prefix menu, and it's one big thing, and it's one big event. You make it family. Now you have a bunch of people experiencing all of the restaurants and all patronizing your event. And there's one cost. Everybody gets their ticket when they show up, and that's it, right? They said to me that the other restaurants are probably not going to do it because they don't work well together.
That does not surprise me. It is the thing where I hear myself kind of constantly like pushing this message out there, but it's like there's certain things, and this is my passion, right? It's like I think about these things that we do with big businesses that are like, again, table stakes. All big businesses do them, right? No, there's going to be no big business out there that says we've allocated no time or money to branding and marketing, right? It just doesn't exist, right? There's nobody who doesn't have some expansion strategy. Can you imagine if Apple opened a single Apple store and it was wildly successful and they never opened another one? Like that just would never happen, right? Like, of course,
and they did that. They did that. It was called the garage. When they first started that.
And that's right. It's like, of course they're going to expand. Of course there's a benefit, right? McDonald's, there's probably 5 McDonald's like within like 15 minutes of my house, right? Mm-hmm. Of course they decided, hey, if so many people are coming to this location, we should open up a second one, right? Of course there's a...
Orlando, we're going to have another conversation about access to capital, because when it comes to small businesses, that can be one of the major barriers, is access to capital and access to the education around funding and franchising, right? Because Charlie could have franchised his barbershop, right? Charlie could have opened a few more locations and put a franchise in that bad boy. Next thing you know, he has left money for all of his heirs and his family in perpetuity. So,
yeah, it's interesting because by the way, I thought way too much about this. Like, I'm like a half barber owner. I'm like,
you're Charlie's new financial advisor. Right?
It's like, it's like the place was literally called Barbershop. Like, so it wasn't even called, like, it officially wasn't even called Charlie. It was just a sign up that said Barbershop. So, like, my thing was, you don't even have to share money. You could just go to any other barbershop and say, hey, let's just advertise together. You can keep all the money that comes to your location. We don't have to profit share or anything else, but we can at least show a united front so that people say, hey, actually, I'm in this town and I need a haircut. Where can I go? Right? So people go to McDonald's because it's consistent. They don't actually go to McDonald's assuming that the burgers are better. If it's Charlie's Hamburgers and McDonald's, if you just had to guess, you probably figure Charlie's, the local burger place, is probably better. It's just not consistent. You've never had Charlie's before. So
Yeah.
when you don't want to go, you know what you want. I want number 3. I want it, I want this, right? And it's like,
I don't want to think about it.
That's it. So like, imagine the barbershop experience or the hair salon experience where somebody just brought in consistency, where you just knew, like, this is what a haircut costs. Here is how I schedule to get a haircut. This is how I ensure that I don't have to wait 4 hours when I go to the place.
You know what?
Things could turn it into a huge business.
Well, I want to add on top of that, because it's not just Charlie's Barbershop, right, on the corner, figuratively speaking. It's also marketing agencies, right? Because there isn't a chain of marketing. I mean, yeah, we know that there's some big names and so forth that have that have some global locations, but at the same time, there isn't a lot of clear processes there where you know that there's a consistency from one agency in London to the same agency in New York. Not necessarily the case, right? So this idea that the folks from McDonald's, and I forgot the gentleman's name who actually started that whole thing with McDonald's. I mean,
Ray Kroc.
Thank you. That repeatability, that reliability, and that trust is what made McDonald's who they are today. Same thing with Henry Ford and the Model T. It's the repeatability, it's the assembly line process. And for that, I want to leave this conversation there, right? Focusing on trust, repeatability, creating relationships, and leveraging opportunities to expand, right? That's the big thing. That's the idea behind the 10X podcast, is how can you use marketing, AI, emerging technologies, and all that we've been looking at in terms of how you grow a brand. How can you use all of that to expand your services and help more people? That's really what it comes down to. So, Orlando, I want to thank you for joining me today on the podcast. This conversation was amazing. You did not disappoint. You're dropping pearls of wisdom, you're dropping funny stories. So thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you next week. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much.